The Child Story Bible by Catherine G. Voss. Chapter 9. What the First Men Were Like. I've been telling you all about wicked Cain and his descendants. What are descendants? Children, and grandchildren, and grandchildren's children, and so on. These we call descendants. How dreadful it would have been if all the people in the world had become like wicked Cain. God would not permit such a thing to happen, however. God gave Adam and Eve another son to take the place of Abel, whom Cain had killed. Eve was very glad to have another baby. Cain had had to go far away, and she never saw him. Besides, he had caused them great sorrow. Abel was dead. Eve called this new son Seth. She said, God has given me another son to take the place of Abel, whom Cain has killed. Adam and Eve were 130 years old when Seth was born. Yet Adam was a very young man when he was 130 years old. How is that possible? God let Adam live a very, very long time. He was 930 years old before he died. He lived almost 1,000 years. Adam had a great many children, both boys and girls, before he died. Most of Adam's children lived a long time too. They also lived to be almost 1,000 years old. Many of their children, in turn, lived almost 1,000 years. The world was becoming full of people. Many of those people lived to be almost 1,000 years old. The one who lived the longest was Methuselah. He lived to be 969 years old. He was the oldest man that ever lived. Why did God let those first people live so long? The Bible does not tell us, but I shall tell you what I think. I think that they were very much stronger than people are now. God had wanted men to live forever. Even after they had sinned and God had told them that they must die sometime, they still had a great deal of strength. They did not wear out as soon as we do. The Bible tells us that many of them were giants, mighty men of renown, the Bible calls them. They lived longer, and many of them were much taller and stronger than we are. Probably they had better minds than we have, too. I think, too, that God let them live very long so that they should have time to learn how to do things and then teach their children. There was very much to learn. But God had made man with a desire to learn and with a mind keen and bright to think and plan. So the people on earth soon learned how to build a house. They learned how to make axes for cutting down trees for lumber. They learned about fire, how to make a fire and how to use it for cooking. They had to make kettles to hold the food they cooked, and they found copper and iron to use for that. And they taught all these things to their children and grandchildren. Probably another reason the first people lived so long was so that they could teach their children and grandchildren about God. Adam, who once had talked with God in the garden, could tell them all about the wonderful first things. For there was no Bible to read so that they might learn about God and his dear son Jesus who was to come. After a while, men learned to write. They learned to make the letters of the alphabet. But at first there were no books, and the only way things could be remembered was for fathers and mothers to tell their children all that they had learned from their parents and grandparents. Adam lived to tell the story of creation to very many children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. Among all those people, there was one man who did not live as long as the others. That man was Enoch. Enoch lived to be only 365 years old, and he did not die. What happened to him then if he did not die? something very wonderful. Enoch was a very good man. He loved God, and he prayed to him. He thought about him so much that it was just as if God were close to him, and he could walk and talk with him. The Bible says Enoch walked with God. God loved this good man Enoch, and he did something very wonderful for him. God took him straight up to heaven, took him up with his body without his having to pass through the experience of death, as all other people must. The Bible says, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not found, for God took him. So you see, there was one man who was very good in that long, long ago. When we go to heaven, we shall see that saintly man of old.